All right, so the last category was that fungi can be parasitic or pathogenic, meaning that they cause disease. So you don't necessarily have to memorize tinea, that is the genus name of one of these fungi, but I would like you to know that athlete's foot and ringworm and jock itch are all caused by a fungus in this particular genus. So this is what ringworm looks like, and I don't know if anybody's ever experienced it. You can see a lot of inflammation there, but it's not caused by a worm. It's actually caused by a fungus. Okay, maybe you've had athlete's foot or nail fungus, which you can see on the toes here, also caused by a fungus, which means that you could not treat this with an antibiotic, because fungi don't respond to antibiotics. You would have to treat it with an antifungal. And those are usually pretty strong drugs, and so you don't want to be taking them for an extended period of time because it puts some pressure on your liver. So here's the nail fungus. And just one point here, if you are somebody that likes to go to the salons to get your nails done, I would really check out where you're going, because keep in mind that fungus reproduces by spores. And so if somebody used that foot bath before you that had a nail fungus, it's possible that spores would get in the water. So salon owners are supposed to be very careful about cleaning and everything between customers, because that would be a way to spread nail fungus from one person to another person. Another example of a fungal parasite is Candida, and I'm sure you've heard of yeast infections. I'm showing the oral example here in the mouth, but it also can be found as a vaginal yeast infection. Again, would need to be treated with an antifungal. And then we do have fungus that will be parasites of other kinds of animals. So I've put some big names here. You do not have to know these big names. Chytrid is a type of fungus, okay? So I would like you to recognize that. It's a pretty old primitive fungus, but we are finding in these times, let's say in the last 10 or so years, that this particular fungus, you can just understand it or recognize it from BD, which is the shortened version of the name, but it is causing huge declines in the amphibian, the frog population all over the world. And frogs are a really important link in the food chain. So if this happens, it really is a huge disruptor. And so I do have you take a look at this when we do our zoo exercise. We talk about it again, but I want you to know that the chytrid is a fungus, and it causes major issues in frog populations. So I put a map here, and this map is a little bit old, but you can see that it's completely all over the United States, all over Central America, the Caribbean. Costa Rica is really concerned with their different frog populations becoming extinct. South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, you can see it all over the map. So it's not just affecting one area of our planet, but it's affecting a lot of areas that have these amphibians or frogs as an important part of the ecosystem. So again, just so that I don't make these presentations too long, I'm not playing all the videos, but I would suggest that you watch them. So this particular one is of a fungal parasite that infects insects, and basically I think some people refer to it as the zombie fungus, because it will actually go to the brain of the insect and take over and kill the insect, and then you have these big fungal hyphae growing out of the heads of the insects. So again, a very, that's kind of a problem, because insects are another one of those organisms that are an important part of many food chains. And then we also see fungi as pathogens or disease-causing agents in plants. So leaf curl, this is in the peach. So, if you have a peach orchard, you don't want this happening to your peach orchard. You get them all into the leaves, and then the leaves can't do photosynthesis, and that causes damage to your peach crop. Ergo, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but this is a fungus that infects corn and infects wheat. And so the black here are the spores, but this is the source of LSD, which is hallucinogenic. So there are many fungi that do produce toxins or neurotoxins that have different kinds of effects. So I don't know who the first person was to discover this, but this is where LSD originated from. Okay, and just a couple, you don't have to memorize all these names of trees, but the point being here that in this country, for example, with the Dutch elm disease, basically it wiped out by the 1980s, pretty much 75% of that particular species of tree in this country. That's a lot of forests that are wiped out. Same thing with chestnut, which is another kind of tree that we find in this country. Huge percentage of those trees were wiped out by the chestnut blight fungus, and then we don't have those trees in this country anymore. Okay, so medical importance. What's another reason that these organisms are important? And you've probably heard the story with penicillin, but penicillium is the name of the fungus. It's this green fungus right here. If you've let oranges sit around too long in your kitchen, you may see a green mold growing on your oranges, and that's most likely penicillium. So that is actually the source of the antibiotic penicillin. Okay, I'm going to show you, and we're just going to talk a little bit about this particular discovery, because sometimes scientists are messy and they aren't as careful as they should be, but they're also very observant. And so in the case here, Alexander Fleming is the one who is given the name of the person who discovered penicillin, but basically growing Petri plates with bacterial cultures on them. Okay, one weekend they accidentally left the lids off of a couple of the Petri plates, and so fungal spores fell into the culture, started to grow, but what they noticed was that wherever this fungal culture was growing, there was no bacteria growing there. So some people might have just thrown the plates away and started over, but he was like, well, that's really interesting. There must be something produced by this penicillium mold that is inhibiting growth of bacteria, and that's where penicillin came from, which was super important in World War II with treating infections and wounds and things like that. And so less people died as a result of being able to treat pretty basic bacterial infections. So I put a couple of things on economic importance. Just people pay money to eat fungus, okay, whether it's morels, which are very similar to mushrooms, truffles, which maybe you've had something with truffle oil on it. Truffles themselves don't look very appetizing, but they're very expensive. So they can sell for up to $600 a pound. They're sniffed out, they grow underground, they're sniffed out by dogs or pigs, and there can be big fights over areas in the forest where truffles grow in Europe on who has the rights to these, because it's quite a big economic boon for those people who sell them. And then just for you to think about health-wise, you can buy shiitake mushrooms pretty much in any produce department and grocery store and cook with them and so forth. But these shiitake mushrooms do also have the quality of lowering blood pressure. And so that's, they have a good health benefit too. And then cheeses. Now, these are the more expensive cheeses, and some of them I would say are a little bit on the smelly side. But blue cheese or Stilton cheese, where you see the different colors in the cheese, that comes from the fungus that is fermenting the dairy product and making it into cheese. And those are quite expensive cheeses. Okay, and then yeast, which is our only example of a single-celled or unicellular fungi, undergo fermentation, the process of fermentation, and this process produces two products. It produces ethanol, which is an alcohol, and it also produces carbon dioxide. And so if you put yeast in your bread dough, then it's going, as it produces the carbon dioxide, it's going to produce gases which cause your bread to rise. But it also will ferment whatever you put it with, whether it's a sugar or a grape juice or whatever it is. The yeast will ferment that and produce alcohol, which is a huge economic product in our society. Okay, so the kind of summary picture from your book shows information on fungus in terms of how it works, and then it has the phylum. Remember, I'm not worried about these phyla at all. We talked a little bit about basic life cycle of a fungus, but I chose to cover them based on some of their importances and their uses in our environment and in our society, and not so much on their taxonomic classification. So that is how I will test you on the fungus kingdom.